to move one of his pieces of legislation forward. I'm Representative Brett Harrell, the Vice Chair of this committee, so he's asked if I would call us to order today. This is actually the first meeting of the Budget and Fiscal Affairs Oversight Committee for this session, so welcome all new members, of which I'm one, to our meeting. And today we have a presentation from the GTA, and Mr. Rhodes is here to make a presentation to us, and that we'll have not taken any action today. I know schedules are busy and some of the members may have to step out quickly to go to other meetings, and we may have others, including Chairman Martin, joining us shortly. So we've got everybody checked in, I believe, and if there's no other announcement, Mr. Rhodes, if you don't mind, from Georgia Technology Association, if you'll come forward, I appreciate it. Let's see if I can turn on the microphone there. Let's see.
Testing. All right, great. Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity for the Georgia Technology Authority to come in and give a presentation to your committee and tell you about the work that we're doing. I'm Calvin Rhodes. I started, I guess it's been, 27 months ago with the new administration. And very happy coming in from the private sector and working on what is probably one of the largest transformation. I know some of the words that we'll use, if I use something you're not following what I'm using, we use transformation a lot at the Georgia Technology Authority, but it's the modernization effort of the state's information technology. And so we wanted to give you an overview of that, but I felt like it might be important before we get into some of that work is to actually talk to you a little bit about what all the Georgia Technology, the Technology Authority does. So with that, I wanted to, first of all, we are an authority, so we have the ability to contract across multiple years. That's probably one of the biggest differences of an authority other than an agency. And today I wanted to make sure that we discuss the different components of the IT spend across the state. I know in the budget hearings, a lot of times when you hear information technology spending that we think GTA, about $1 billion that is spent in the state on IT spending each year, we are a component of that. So I wanted to make sure we give some clarification in that area. One of the areas where I talked with Chairman Martin about was spending some time on the GETS privatization efforts. Those contracts were signed, I believe it was in 2008, and actually work began in 2009. So to give you an update on how that modernization effort is going. And then, again, trying to bring some clarity in the budget. When you see the telecom line item, what's included in that, what's not. And then maybe finish up, if we have time, with a few comments around what's going on around the country from an IT security standpoint that you're hearing quite a bit about in the national news of late. Today I'd like to start with the fact that we're very excited about the accomplishments that we've made in the modernization effort over the last 18-month period. Certainly, I think out of the gate, everyone involved in the initiative would tell you there were some struggles. It's been a tremendous amount of work. The complexity of what we're doing, I think, was much greater than anybody had anticipated. And just, again, trying to get systems and all in place from the start, I think, took a lot of effort. It's probably important to go back and look at what were the initiatives of that program. It was certainly from trying to bring stability to IT infrastructure across the state, reliability for agencies that are supporting the missions which directly impact citizens. And probably one key area was the security, making sure that our environment was secure. And that is, I think, even more important today with what we're seeing that's going on around the nation. And so I think if I could maybe just start out with pointing you to slide 2 and I think the material that we handed out. Again, what is the Georgia Technology Authority? I just want to probably back up and cover a couple items. We're 165 people. Agency back before the privatization effort was right around 700 people on our staff. So a very, very different organization, a few years into this. When we look at the staff that IBM brought to the table. They were the winning bidder on the infrastructure side. And we'll talk a little bit about what actually is included in infrastructure. And then the other provider is AT&T that has another couple hundred people that support the efforts of the state on a daily basis. We have representatives with them that join us today and could possibly field some questions at the end of the presentation if you have some questions directly for them. Beth Siskowski is the chief executive that's on the ground here every day. And then Jenny Gustafson is the AT&T vice president assigned to the state. When we look at infrastructure spend in the with GTA, I think this it's probably important to point out that we're the executive branch IT area, and again, not for all of IT and executive branch. I know I get a lot of questions about how do we support the legislative or the judicial branches. We really do not. I think occasionally your IT teams may ask us for some advice and direction, but you have your own group of folks who look after your infrastructure. We do provide some network connectivity for the legislature, but again, you support that yourself. Slide 2 that I wanted to that I mentioned earlier that I want to discuss for a few minutes. I'm trying to give some scope. The entire graph here represents about $700 million of spending. As I said earlier, the state does about $1 billion of spending in the IT area. The difference there is that self-reported numbers by agencies to us. We're responsible to provide an IT annual report to the legislature each year. So not everyone actually provides the information. We know that the folks not providing information, there's another $200 to $300 million worth of spending in that area before you even add on the university system, which is another sizable spend. So when we're talking IT spending, we're in the managed infrastructure network area as the blue area of the chart. So that's where really most of my points that we'll cover today cover that particular area of the spending. And I'm happy to try to answer some questions in the other area as well. But again, we have very limited view into that with agencies unless they have a project that they're working through. The state's a federated model. By that, each agency has its own IT organization that's focused on mostly the application component area. There's many states that have that similar model. And again, the red area of this chart would have items in it such as applications, which is software, licensing costs for agencies, their development, their ability to support applications, help desk, those type of things. Again, the blue area that we'll be covering will include, from computers, laptop, desktop, those type of things. You'll hear us refer to the North Atlanta Data Center. So in Alpharetta, the state has a modern data center that we're very proud of. I'll invite you to, as your schedules permit, to it's a pretty fascinating tour to see what's going on there and the accomplishments that have been made there. We also look after email, IT infrastructure security, and then the state's mainframe. There's a couple mainframes in the state, the one that we look after, and I think the Department of Labor has the other. And then we'll get into a lot of those details when we move on through the slide deck. The information on this chart is from Gartner. We picked some states that are similar in our size for comparison. It's through a Gartner study that they actually did for the state of Washington. It's a 2012 study. The peer group, again, is where we compare. But really the state that is consolidating its infrastructure, we measure ourselves against Michigan. They're probably about 10 years into their effort. We're about 3 years into ours. It can be a lengthy effort to try to get all of your agencies who have done things in very different ways, try to get them to a very standardized point. So that's the effort that's underway. On slide 3, I thought it might be important to share with you some of the things that we're involved in from our purpose and objectives. But our purpose, again, is to make sure that we're providing reliable and secure systems across the state. And this can be anywhere from systems like at the Department of Revenue, the new integrated tax system, which is a very large system that's gone in recently. We provided the infrastructure for that. The agency is responsible for the application that's running on that system. I think it was around a $40 million project for that agency. Of course, the infrastructure component is a much smaller piece of that. But the development and just, again, trying to change your workflows with that system. And there's examples like that all across the state that we get involved with. Our objectives of consolidation, securing state data. I think one of the important missions of us is that citizens entrust their information to us with the identity theft that's going on across the country. Something that is extremely more important today and where some of those threats originate today. The state was basically not doing any disaster recovery type issues, at least not on any scale, before our modernization efforts. Each year now we're actually exercising a disaster recovery. We actually stand up systems from networks, loading users, loading applications to where agencies actually log in and make sure that their systems work. That's the first time in the state's history, starting just a couple of years ago, that we've had the ability to do that. And again, the complexity of doing that and getting to 100% success took several years, and not just our efforts, not just our service provider efforts, but a lot of work with agencies that have to work with us to make something that big and complex occur. Another thing that I wanted to cover is through these efforts, the skill set in the IT area, changes quickly. There's a lot of new technology that comes on board. The salaries that the state is able to pay, a lot of times we will spend a lot of energy bringing in new people, training them, getting them educated, giving them some experience, and then they can quickly move on to work elsewhere at a much higher salary. So that was a driver of the privatization effort, is knowing that we could not retain the level of talent that we needed in these critical areas, which has been definitely a success of what we've been trying to accomplish. The GTA role, these contracts, we spend about $220 million a year on our infrastructure and network voice contracts. And so our job as GTA, a primary function there is to actually manage that spend. So we're representing agencies and making sure that they're getting the levels of service that they need and expect. At the same time, and I guess there's three areas that we would that we break our services into. The first one is service delivery. So, when something stops working, getting with the agency and trying to determine, is that infrastructure, is it network, is it their application, and then working with them to make sure that their services are brought back online as soon as possible. Some of these systems are very dated. We deal with systems that are 15 and 20 years old, and so the reliability of some of those systems is not what you would want if you were running a business today. So through the modernization effort, we're moving to a cycle of, you won't find an in-scope agency that would have a laptop that's older than 36 months. So, 100% of those across these agencies have been refreshed at this point. Desktops are on a 60-month recycle schedule. And we're on target to complete those, I think, it's 2 more years before that would actually be due to be completed. I think we're within about a year of completing that work. Servers, which is where the expense is in the IT world, is all the stuff that's in the back office. Those are also on 60-month recycles. And as the modernization effort is moving forward, we actually move people's agencies' applications to these new systems, and then it starts that refresh cycle. Now, in the meantime, as you're trying to work through each agency falling into their place on the schedule, there's what we call a currency program, where if we have a chronic problem somewhere where those systems are getting replaced before they're actually relocated into our state-of-the-art data center. So lots of different moving parts. The other area, so I've mentioned service delivery, which is, again, something breaks, we go fix it wherever it's located in the state. The second area is project delivery. That's an area where an agency is standing up a new system, like the integrated tax system that I mentioned for Department of Revenue. There's probably 60 of those projects of various sizes on our list today. that we're moving through and working with agencies to deliver. Of course, you can never do it as quick as they would like, and within the budget that they would like. But again, it's truly trying to partner up with them, set priorities, and move through that work, because the number one priority for the mission that was given to me is the transformation modernization. So that's the third area, and so that's where we've spent a lot of resources trying to get that move through to completion. So it's 55,000 task item plan. There's a number of projects, and we'll get to a slide here that will give you a view of that scope in just a moment. Let me flip on through here. On slide number 4, I wanted you to get a feel for when I talk about full service agencies. At the beginning of this project that started in the last administration, it was understood that with the size and scope of this, that you probably didn't want to tackle the entire enterprise at one time with the amount of work that was in front of us. So the state decided to pick where 70 to 75% of infrastructure spend was occurring in the state, and that became the in-scope agencies. So that's the agencies that are listed on slide 4. And so we call these agencies full service. So if their servers, desktops, laptops, networks, all of that is in scope, and at GTA is part of their IT organization that delivers those services. So on the next slide, on slide 5, I try to give you a breakdown of who are the customers that GTA would support. And so the very small circle at the bottom there represents those 15 agencies that are on the prior slide that are the full service agencies. So there's about 36,000 users in that category. The next, and then over to the right, you'll see the type of services that we provide them. So from phone services, which is dial tone, network, so connectivity, so that they can communicate with their offices spread all across the state. Very secure network that the state, we can ensure that it meets all the security standards that we've set as a state that are important for them to meet. And then some of the other areas, the DR that's listed there is disaster recovery. All of that is included in those services provided to those 15 large agencies. The next bucket is the 85 executive branch agencies, another 58,000 users, much more limited services. They're not fully managed. And the 15 where a lot of IT personnel came out of agencies. When we went through the privatization effort, about 1,000 folks came off of state payrolls, and those services were provided through these 2 contracts I referenced. The 85 agencies is more of, they need mainframe services. That's too expensive for them to stand up their own mainframe, so that's sitting in the North Atlanta data center. They provide, they ask and get those services based on their needs, pretty much, I won't say at will, but they're managing more of those services themselves. We're responsible for giving security direction to those agencies, not actually physically providing that security. And then the broader 1,400 customers, I think it's really around 110,000 users. That would include a lot of your local and county offices that are within your districts that would purchase their dial tone from us. They would purchase their connectivity, their connections to the internet, those type of things. And they're truly at will. They're buying from us because it gives them an easy mechanism to procure those services at a very good price point, because we're using the entire purchasing power of the state. So we get a lot of very positive feedback from them for the ability that they're able to leverage those contracts. Slide 6. Again, the intent of this slide was just to give you a view of the modernization effort that's going on. So I'm not really asking you to look too much across the top, which is some of the big technology areas of the projects, but around 155 projects listed here. Blue, which has got a C on it, is complete. Gives you the dates that those areas were started and completed. Green is the work that we have in flight today. A lot of effort on agencies' parts, especially when you get over in the server consolidation area. That's actually the moving of applications from old servers to new servers. The white boxes are the ones that are still yet to be started, and the furthest date that you should see on this chart is that all of this work should be completed in the August 2014 timeframe. Our work here is about 60% complete. When we look back 24 months ago, we were less than 10% complete. Project was on hold, dealing with just again some of the issues that we'd had trying to get started out of the gate, and so agreed on a new approach, and that new approach is working today. I think agencies would tell you probably working a little too well. They've got a lot of resources working with us. We have a lot of projects in flight, but everyone would agree that this is hard work. It distracts them from their mission of their agencies, that they'd like to push through it as soon as possible. So even though with the resource restraints and all, that we are working as a team to try to complete that work. And the next slide, slide 7, was just to try to give you a feel of what's all included in this telecom line item that you see in the budget. 100% of that is not GTA, but around 100 different services are in that particular line item. We've mentioned the phone service, but from the data center, system connectivity, mainframe usage, a big area is data storage. Most states are seeing around 25% growth in the data that they're keeping today. A disaster recovery component. Mobile devices are included in the telecom line item as well. That's not a GETS item. So there are some other items that are included in that number as well that are very important areas of technology for agencies today. And then on slide 8 and 9, we just really wanted to provide you, when you see an either increase or decrease in an agency's budget line item, again under the telecom label, a lot of times I'll be asked, well, why is that number up X amount? Well, in a consumption model, which is the outsourcing, the privatization effort, it is based on what the state consumes. So if I'm using this laptop here, and we shift priorities for an agency, with budget cuts, you remove people. Well, this laptop can be turned in. It's a service that we buy as a state, so we're not stuck with infrastructure when we no longer have a need for it. Likewise, if an agency needs additional items, it's again, you order the service, you pay for it as long as you need it. We turn it in when we no longer need it. So the example, like on the Department of Behavioral Health here, is they had items moving both up and down. We make an estimate, I guess in the August-September timeframe, working with OPB and the agencies, trying to make estimates on what is the consumption that the agency is going to need. And in the same time frame, they may be having a new federal program that's, maybe there's a grant attached to it, and they're needing to put in additional infrastructure to support those new missions or to support something in a new way. A big example of that today would be over at Department of Community Health with the new Medicaid eligibility system. It's estimated that that's new system will cost an agency over $100 million, and it's something that the federal government's pushing to have them implement pretty quickly. So a lot of moving parts that would, in a consumption model, which is very different from what a lot of agencies are used to. They're more used to come in and ask for a capital expenditure. You see that expense one time, and then they'll utilize that for several years. So one of the things that this brought to the state was a lot of the dollars that were spent on personnel left the state. We could go and get very specialized resources based on what we're working on through our providers. As those projects finish, those resources leave and work elsewhere. We still have to meet all of the federal requirements from CGIS, which is the crime data, that have very strict rules on who can touch those systems, how the background checks have to be conducted on those individuals, to a HIPAA data, a different set of federal requirements, to IRS, which is the 1075 publication. It's a huge publication on how you actually can work with those. So in our data center, we actually have segments of that data center that meet each of the federal requirements that we can, ensure that we've made very distinct engineering decisions to make sure that not only does it meet it today, but we have flexibility to change in the future. And probably the last item I'd like to spend just a minute on is the cybersecurity threat area. There's a few-page article that was just released yesterday that I thought had some interesting facts. As the state CIO, one of my responsibilities was to try and get a security clearance from Homeland Security. So after 60-something pages of application, I received my security clearance. But that's because Homeland Security wants to brief us on the threats that are out in front of us as a state. And one of the funny things about that is, in starting in that role, is we're going to tell you something, but you can't tell anybody else who doesn't have the security clearance. But you need to know this information. So, but it is helpful to see where threats are coming from, how serious those threats are, which helps us make sure that as we're working projects and more of the security component of projects in the IT area, it does make me realize that we have to focus, and it has to be a higher priority than what I thought it needed to be when I started. So it's very relevant information. But when I see an article like this, it will actually let us publicly speak to some of the issues there. You'll notice that on that bar chart on the second page, that the third area is where we place government on the threat level. Another public item is that South Carolina had a tremendous security breach just a few months ago. You may have seen that in the news. But that was traced back to this group that this article refers to, which is a nation-state sponsored terrorism. Our biggest threat used to be organized crime, coming from the old Soviet bloc nations, where they were strictly, it was a dollars and cents type threat. They could get into these large databases that government has, steal somebody's identity. It had a market price that they could go obtain for those. Well, today, that threat is surpassed by the nation-state's terrorism, and which is so it definitely has our focus there. States around the country, just like Georgia, the number of probe scans that we see on a daily basis exceed over 1 million scans and probes of our systems. So they're always looking for unopened or unlocked doors, and those threats change every day on their sophistication. I know that some of the information that you can read online about the threat from China, it's just the numbers of people that they have actually pursuing this area, which is pretty scary. So anyway, hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of what we do.
Very good.
I can get more into the technology side of what we do if you'd like. Or
well, thank you, Mr. Rhodes. I appreciate
direction. So.
Yeah, I appreciate the overview of the authority. Do members of the committee have any questions or comments for Mr. Rhodes in this presentation? And we've got good information here. We've got contact information. I'm sorry, Chairman Martin was not able to be with us, but any other comment from you or the people from your staff that joined us today? Anything else? Very good. I'm sorry? On page, Mr. Rhodes, if you could, on page 5, DR lower right corner, what is that acronym?
The DR, that's the disaster recovery. So again, that's when we stand up everything from networks to systems and hardware. Again, that's done actually out in Boulder, Colorado, when we have a disaster. Once our modernization is actually finished, the disaster you're protecting from is something that happens to our North Atlanta data center. And that's a very hardened facility. I mean, it can take a direct hit from a what type tornado? Category 5 tornado, which is probably our most serious threat other than a fire or something like that. And we have very sophisticated systems in that facility to handle those type threats. And so, again, actually, I would like to maybe pass this out real quickly.
Certainly.
There's 2 dates on there. You can sign up for either date if you have an interest in going up to Alpharetta with us to see what that facility looks like. That's an area where we've spent a lot of energy as an agency, something we're very proud of and would love to show you and tell you more than you would probably like to know about it. So.
Well, thank you again very much, and it was a great overview. I'm sure a number of us would like to come visit the data center, and we'll find out a little bit more as we go on. This being our first organizational meeting of the committee this year. We have no other business before us. I know a number of members have other meetings to get to. Then without objection, we'll go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. Appreciate your presentation, and look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Great.
Thank you.
You.